Two more additions in the past 2 days in the portal for Missouri. I have to say the speed at which this is happening is surprising me. Let's talk about it all on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and, well, a bunch of basketball to get to today. I thought I was going to have to talk more football this week, but the basketball portal just keeps giving even during a dead period here. So plenty to talk to. Do want to start quickly by reminding you today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. And you know what? I also want to start the show here, unfortunately, with some sad Missouri news. I acknowledge this on social media, but I really feel I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the passing of Andy Locke, a 4-year letterman on the Missouri football team from 1986 to 1989. Andy became a, well, rather famous and successful restaurateur, I would say, in the Lee Summit, Kansas City area, and of course was famously the father of former Missouri quarterback and current New York Giant Drew Lock as well. So obviously, gosh, just doing some quick math here, 89. Andy Locke was his final year with Mizzou. That put him in his late 50s, more or less. My goodness, that is, I have no words. I really do. Just condolences out to Drew Lock and the entire Locke family and all of Andy Locke's friends. That's a tough blow right there. What can I say? But, obviously no easy transition here. We got to start talking about Missouri basketball because, a couple of huge additions to the roster in the last couple of days here. One quite a bit bigger than the other, I should say. One. First of all, let's just start with who they are. First of all, former UCLA product, Chicagoland area player Sebastian Mack. Here's the thing with Mack. You look at his numbers on paper, and quite frankly, he's more or less an inefficient scorer. 29% from three, sub 50% on his twos. He does get to the free throw line a lot. That is the one thing that Mack, no question, is an upper echelon player offensively there. But this seems like more of a case where Dennis Gates is actually focusing a little bit more on defense here because by all accounts, Sebastian Mack is indeed a stopper defensively. Definitely a plus player is Sebastian Mack statistically, according to all accounts. So I certainly hope that that's the case because I'm just not seeing a lot of stops on this Missouri roster right now. And part of that is, well, Luke Northweather, another guy that Missouri's added in the portal, another local guy. Of course, Javon Porter, the first, formerly of Columbia, Missouri, and Tolton High School. Well, now Luke Northweather spent his first 2 seasons at Oklahoma. He's from Wardsville. Blair Oaks High School is Luke Northweather. And as I jokingly called him, he is the player to be named later in the Yaya Keita trade when Keita left Missouri and transferred to Oklahoma a few years ago under Conzo Martin. So what do I think about Northweather? Well, I'm a little bit worried that he is just a floor spacer, just looking at his numbers. The fit, you see, I think Missouri really needs another shooter and another defensive-oriented big man. I do think Luke Northweather obviously can space the floor. He's a solid three-point shooter at about, 32% or so, I believe I saw the number was for his career. But I will just say, defensively, he doesn't seem like much of an addition at all. And I think that's something that Missouri really needs right now. I've gone on and on about this forever. Hey, get me a defensive-oriented big man. Right now, Northweather seems a little bit redundant to what Jacob Cruz provides on the team next year, but it's also quite possible that he's better. He being Luke Northweather is a better player in the paint than what he showed at Oklahoma, because it's not as though statistically he was bad at putting the ball in the basket from 2-point range. He just almost never took a 2-point shot in his 2 seasons in Oklahoma. Again, he was just basically cast as a 3-point shooter with Porter Moser and the Sooners. I think what you saw is in high school, a kid who's listed at 6'11" is Luke Northweather, a guy who could definitely punish smaller players in the paint. What you wonder is maybe that just ability isn't there in the SEC, or is it a matter of just he wasn't asked to do that? I think obviously Dennis Gates is going to be attracted to a player like Luke Northweather because of that size and the ability to space the floor. I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit more there with Luke Northweather offensively that Missouri can explore a little bit. I think that would be the optimistic side of the addition here. I guess the pessimistic side would be, well, Missouri by all accounts basically passed on Luke Northweather coming out of high school. What has he shown in the last 2 seasons at Oklahoma that would make you change your evaluation in him would be my question, especially with the timing of this. Why now would be my question, because, and that was my question with Javon Porter, by the way. I think it's even more relevant here with Luke Northweather, a guy who had Missouri added to the roster maybe a month or 2 from now, later in this process, when you're sort of filling out the back end of your roster, I think this would make a lot of sense. I think Northweather's a kid who, if you can talk yourself into him having more untapped potential and upside here, I just don't understand why Missouri is rushing to take guys that I don't necessarily think are going to play a lot this early in the transfer portal process. That's the part that surprises me quite a bit, that on Luke Northweather in particular. With Sebastian Mack, I think it's more of, hey, Missouri likes him as a perimeter defender. Maybe they think they can get more out of him as a shooter. By the way, he was the 66th ranked guy coming out of high school a couple years ago, started immediately for Mick Cronin in UCLA, and then moved to the bench this past season. Didn't get quite as much run as he probably would have liked. So I don't know, if you're C.Y. Young, if you're the shot doctor, if you're Dennis Gates in Missouri, maybe you think you can get more out of Sebastian Mack offensively, because if his shot can come around a little bit, well, now you've really got something, because again, his reputation is of a really, really good defensive player on the perimeter. Obviously, with the way Missouri finished the season, that's something that they could use quite desperately. So now with Marcus Allen, Aiden Shaw exiting, 3 players coming in, Javon Porter, Luke Northweather, and Sebastian Mack, plus a couple of true freshmen being added to the Missouri roster as well. If my math is correct here, 2 more spots for Missouri to fill, at least for now. And I am putting some emphasis on for now, because if I were a betting man, I would bet that Missouri has not seen its last exit from this roster. And I'm going to explain why coming up here in just a little bit. But first, this is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Well, now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes in as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction, file every form, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So again, if my math is being done correctly here, 2 more spots to fill for Missouri, and I would say for now, that's my emphasis here. And you could even go as far to say, well, who is next? Who's next to exit from this Missouri basketball roster? I think 3 additions already, especially a couple in the dead period here. The speed of which this is happening is a little bit surprising to me and makes me have a lot more questions than answers, quite honestly. And I think most of you who are everydayers out there know I'm not the biggest, hey, anonymous sources kind of guy. But having said that, I do know some people around the Missouri basketball program, and one person I talked to in particular definitely thinks that this is not the final exit off of this roster. We'll just have to see what happens here in the coming days. But I don't have any specifics for you there. But just generally speaking, even without that bit of rumor and innuendo, I think it makes logical sense that with only 2 spots left, you might see more spots opening up for Missouri, considering they've taken a couple of big guys already in Javon Porter and Luke Northweather, but neither one of them is a defensive-oriented big man, a shot blocker, a rim protector. Whatever way you want to look at it, in my opinion, that is where Missouri really needs to improve in the transfer portal, if at all possible. So again, all these questions, I think that the speed of which this is happening, again, making a bunch of assumptions is never the greatest idea in this new transfer portal world, considering every cycle has had its own unique set of circumstances so far. It also leads me to wonder if the money in terms of NIL and Missouri basketball, is it there this year? At least to the level it needs to be, because I could see, you can imagine if you are the type of person who has the kind of big bucks to throw around in college basketball name, image, and likeness. Well, if the cost for a good player last season, for example, was, let's just say it was $500,000, and now this season, maybe it's $1 million. Maybe it's even $1.5 million. I have absolutely no idea, but there is a lot of speculation around college basketball right now that there could be some real sticker shock happening here, that the asking prices are a lot higher than maybe, well, the actual payers of this money were expecting. So again, there could be a longer negotiation process playing itself out than in previous years. Also, I'll point out that Dennis Gates has some say here too, specifically about the amount of money being spent. Reportedly, a couple years ago, Dennis Gates basically said pass on a player or two that he felt like were just simply too expensive for the quality of player that they were getting. Now, in my opinion, if there's no salary cap, as a head coach, I'm not really all that worried about the money that is being spent. As long as the person on the other end, hey, if they're happy to spend it and happy to give it to me, I'd be happy to take it if I'm Dennis Gates. Now, the other possibility here is, well, maybe Missouri, again, one possibility is maybe Missouri is moving quickly here because the sticker shock, because the price on the upper echelon players has gotten so high. Well, maybe Missouri is balking a little bit. There could be another possibility, though, which is, hey, Missouri just wants to fill out maybe some role-playing type of spots on this roster early in the process, and now maybe perhaps Missouri is waiting for a couple of big fish in the pond, see if they can reel them in, specifically, of course, Jayden Quaintance. Now, he would obviously fill the need of a defensive-oriented big man for Missouri, so that would check that box in a huge way. Also, Kyan Evans, formerly of Colorado State, a Kansas City, Missouri area product. I think Evans would be one of the best shooters in the portal, without a doubt, one of the best shooters in the country this past season. I think he'd be a no-brainer for Missouri or just about anybody else in the country too. So if you're Missouri, I've advocated the idea that, hey, let's do stars and scrubs a little bit more in the transfer portal. Now, scrubs is obviously, I'm being a little bit, sarcastic there, but the point is you spend the lion's share of your money on a couple of real difference makers and then fill out the back end of your roster with some cheaper options, to me, that actually makes a ton of sense because in basketball, well, to make an obvious statement, you can only play 5 at once. So 1 or 2 that can be a real difference maker can make all the difference in your program. Focus on those guys. And again, some of the guys are more or less replacement level players. You can find those guys for a lot cheaper probably later in the process. Once again, that's why I'm a little bit surprised at the speed, especially during the dead period at which all of this is going down. We'll just have to kind of see where Missouri is at the end of this process, whether that was a good move or a bad move. Also on the high school basketball side for the 2026 class, J.J. Andrews, the number 42 overall prospect according to 24/7 Sports, is going to announce his commitment on May 15th, his final 5 schools. As you might have expected, Missouri among them, Arkansas, Oklahoma, LSU, and Marquette. That is for J.J. Andrews, set to announce on May 15th. And of course, this is a basketball and football program, but I got to give a shout out to the Missouri gymnastics team who advanced to the semifinals yesterday. Elite 8, I suppose, technically you could call this. There's 8 teams left, but really this is basically a Final 4 in terms of actual significance here for the Missouri gymnastics program. I'm thrilled to see this. I have to say, last year I kind of jumped on the Missouri gymnastics bandwagon, watching some Friday Night Heights on the SEC network. Just found all these young ladies to be, I don't know, fun, charismatic, just they're out there having a great time. I will say college gymnastics is just more fun to watch, even though less obviously technically proficient than at the Olympic level, that type of thing. Hey, Simone Biles is incredible, don't get me wrong. I just kind of enjoy the fun that the college gymnasts seem to have versus the stuffiness of the Olympics, that's for sure. But regardless, shout out to the Missouri gymnastics program. They've got a real shot here to do something excellent. They've had an incredible run already here. So I will definitely be watching on ESPN Plus here in the coming days. And coming up on the program, there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there is the NFL draft. Maybe the biggest liars who have ever lied in their entire lying lives. Because one minute you have Luther Burden III is being basically compared to Ted Kaczynski. Well, now one PFF, one mock draft has him going ahead of Shedeur Sanders, believe it or not. So what are we to believe? Well, I'm going to explain what I believe coming up here in just a little bit. But first, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Well, I doubt that's going to be happening to Luther Burden anytime soon. But in our everyday lives, when we're talking about online shopping, you know, getting food delivery, all that type of stuff, it's easy to lose track. Well, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. And you can easily collaborate with another person of your choosing as well. You can track and share personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for half off your first year. So one thing a lot of my Mizzou friends have been asking me lately is, hey, what do you think about Luther Burden and his NFL draft stock dropping? And I immediately have to pump the brakes and go, now, wait a second here. Why do you think Luther Burden's draft stock is dropping? How can we possibly know that is the case? It's sort of like talking about how much your house is worth before you put it on the market. Well, great. If Zillow says it's worth $500,000, that's fantastic. But if you put it on the market for $500,000 and nobody wants to buy it, I'm sorry, it's not worth $500,000. The same can be said for anyone in the NFL draft. All of these anonymous GMs and scouts and whoever these people are, well, they can say all they want about, well, I think Luther Burden's overrated. I think, these character questions, this, that, and the other. It's easy for them to put out these whispers, but then you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? Because in this draft world, if I really, really like Luther Burden and say I don't know, the Denver Broncos picking 20th, and I want him to fall to me at 20th potentially, well, I'm not going to tell everybody how awesome he is, especially the people picking in front of me. No, I'm going to go, I don't know about this Burden kid. Or if it were me, I would just say absolutely nothing ever. That's how I have always played those types of situations. But plenty of people around the NFL, well, they play it a lot differently. They are more of the BS or poker player types. I just think that at some point, somebody's going to call the bluff and pick Luther Burden. I just think the tape doesn't lie. I understand that his statistics, his fantasy stats, as I would call it, were down last season. But again, throw on the tape. When Missouri really needed a play, who did they go to and who came through with it? Well, often it was Luther Burden III, not just last season, but of course in 2023, famously as well. And just to the point of how much BS I think there is out there these days and how, well, unreliable and just not only unreliable, really just fluid this entire situation is, because as soon as you go through a mock draft, as soon as you have a surprise pick in there somewhere, well, that throws everything else into flux. Every other pick is then changed essentially too. And to that point, Shedeur Sanders, Deion's kid, obviously, the quarterback from Colorado, well, he's been expected to be a top 5 pick for weeks here, for months, ever since the end of the college football season. Well, PFF now has him going 21st to the Pittsburgh Steelers, one spot after Luther Burden III. And the reason I really bring this up is, again, in terms of fluidity, who would have predicted that anybody, even a week or two ago, would have had Burden ahead of Shedeur Sanders? That was just not the conventional wisdom whatsoever. And honestly, if that's the conventional wisdom, or this is just somebody going out on a limb here, because I don't see that happening whatsoever. Perhaps the Giants, for example, who are picking 3rd, will decide, we don't want a quarterback, we're fine with Russell Wilson. That would be a stupid decision, in my opinion, but maybe it's one that they'll make. The problem is, I think the farther Shedeur Sanders falls down the board, somebody is going to trade up for him. Some quarterback-needy team that likes him is going to pop up and grab him. Again, I think there's something similar there with Luther Burden III as well, whereas, hey, those top 20, 15 picks, not every single situation is the same. Not all of those teams necessarily need a slot wide receiver. But if you do need a slot wide receiver, you're not going to do much better than Luther Burden III, especially for the cost of a mid to late first round draft pick. He's a guy who I think has more to give. I really do. I think his route running is going to expand in the NFL and get even better. He's already a guy you can just throw the ball to in the flat, and he can make stuff happen with his ability after the catch, his ability to break tackles. I think you're going to see within the next couple seasons, Luther Burden is going to become one of the better route runners at his position as well. I think he has the physical ability to do all the things that you want him to do as just a slot receiver to the intermediate part of the field as well, which is something that, well, just Missouri didn't really exploit very much with Luther or any other receiver in the last couple of seasons. So once again, I just think all of this Luther Burden noise is really just that. I think it's just noise. I think a lot of it is just somebody, maybe multiple teams out there thinking, man, God, this guy really might slide to us in the 20s, that type of thing. Let's actually talk him down a little bit. Think about it. When you're in your fantasy football league and there's somebody out there, you're picking 2 or 3 spots away, you're not exactly telling the guys that are picking in front of you, you know who I really like is this guy. if anything, you're lying to them or you're saying nothing. You're definitely not telling them who you want to pick. I think that's a lot of what is happening here with Luther Burden. And just back to my point about how this process is so utterly fluid, even at the end of the regular season when Armand Membou decided to declare for the NFL draft, how many Missouri fans would have had him going ahead of Luther Burden in the draft? I certainly wouldn't have, and now that's conventional wisdom. It's looking like Membou is a top 10 pick, and this PFF mock that I've been referencing here has him going 7th overall to the New York Jets. So interesting times here in the NFL draft, as always, and it's always interesting when you have a couple of elite prospects as a Missouri fan to watch the NFL draft. So definitely, by the way, appreciate you checking out this show as your first listen as always. But speaking of the draft, you got to check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Again, Membou, Burden. Is the Burden fall real? Find out what these guys think. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I am John Miller. This has been Locked on Mizzou.